I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer, and my life took a nosedive 3 years ago when I married Daniel. Before that, I thought I had it all. A good job, amazing friends, and then Daniel walked into my life. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We clicked instantly, and within a year we were engaged. I was over the moon. What could go wrong, right? Famous last words. The problem wasn't Daniel, not initially anyway. The problem was his mother, Eleanor. From the moment I met her, it was like I was being assessed for a role I was already failing. Her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, would follow me around the room, dissecting every word I said, every move I made. She never explicitly said anything mean, not at first. It was all subtle digs, veiled criticisms disguised as concerned inquiries. "Oh, that's a bold choice of dress, dear. Doesn't it show a bit too much for a family gathering? Are you sure you're eating enough, Serena? Daniel needs a wife who can keep up with him. My name is Selena. Daniel always had such refined taste. I just want him to be happy." It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. Daniel, bless his heart, was oblivious. He just saw his mother being, well, his mother. He'd always brush it off. "She's just being protective, Serena. She loves me." Yeah, she loved him. A little too much, if you ask me. I tried, I really did, to win her over. I sent her thoughtful gifts, a rare first edition of her favorite author, a handcrafted shawl from a local artisan, even a donation in her name to her favorite charity. I cooked her favorite meals, following her impossibly detailed recipes, of course. I even offered to help her with errands and appointments. I wanted peace. I wanted to be part of the family. But Eleanor, nothing was ever enough. It was like she had a predetermined opinion of me, and nothing I did could change it. I was an outsider, a threat to her bond with Daniel. I started feeling suffocated, like I was living in a pressure cooker, constantly trying to anticipate her next jab, her next subtle attack. Then things started to shift. Daniel started changing. He became distant. He'd spend hours on the phone with Eleanor, whispering in hushed tones. He'd come home from work and immediately retreat to the den, emerging hours later with the same vacant look he'd had when his mother had just spent hours with him. I'd try to talk to him, to reconnect, but he'd be preoccupied, distracted. "Just tired, Serena," he'd say, his eyes glazed over. "Long day at the office." But I knew it wasn't just work. It was Eleanor. She was poisoning him against me, whispering doubts and insecurities into his ear. One evening, I overheard a snippet of their conversation. Daniel was on the phone, his voice tight with frustration. "Mom, I can't just... She's my wife." A pause. I couldn't hear Eleanor's response, but I could feel her influence radiating through the phone. But I promised you I'd talk to her." Another pause. This one longer, more intense. "Okay, Mom. I will. I promise." He hung up the phone and turned to me, his face pale and drawn. "Serena, we need to talk." I knew deep down this wasn't going to be good. That conversation was the beginning of the end. Daniel, now clearly under Eleanor's influence, started nitpicking everything I did. The way I loaded the dishwasher, the groceries I bought, the clothes I wore. It was like he was reciting a script, word for word, from his mother's playbook. "Serena, Mom thinks you should wear your hair up more often. It's more flattering. Mom says you're not cooking enough vegetables. Daniel needs his fiber. Mom thinks we should redecorate the living room. It's too modern." It was relentless. I felt like I was living with two people, my husband and his ventriloquist dummy. The worst part was the money. I'm a freelance graphic designer, and while I make a decent living, it's not exactly a fortune. Eleanor, on the other hand, lived a life of lavish excess: designer clothes, expensive jewelry, frequent spa treatments. She acted like money grew on trees. One day she cornered me in the kitchen, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. "Serena, darling, I'm having a bit of a cash flow problem. Just temporary, of course, but the family needs to stick together, doesn't it?" She wanted money. Of course she did. I knew what was coming. "What exactly are you asking, Eleanor?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, Daniel and I were discussing it, and we thought, given your successful career, Perhaps you could contribute a little extra to the household expenses. Just until I get back on my feet, of course. Household expenses? Or your shopping sprees? I retorted, unable to stop myself. Her smile faltered. Serena, that's not fair. I have certain obligations. Keeping up appearances, you know. Daniel deserves a mother who looks presentable. I was seething. I worked my butt off to earn my money, and she wanted me to hand it over so she could maintain her facade of wealth and privilege. But I also knew that if I refused, things would get even worse with Daniel. So I caved. How much? I asked, my voice tight with resentment. Oh, just a small contribution. $1,000 a month should suffice. $1,000. That was a significant chunk of my income, but I saw the gleam in her eyes, the satisfaction in her smile, and I knew I was trapped. And so it began. Every month, I begrudgingly transferred $1,000 to Eleanor's account. It's for the family, she'd say, her voice dripping with fake gratitude. But I knew the truth. It was for her. I told myself it was temporary, that things would get better, that Daniel would eventually see through his mother's manipulation. But deep down, I knew I was fooling myself. Things just kept spiraling. Eleanor's demands increased. The digs became sharper, the criticisms more pointed. Daniel grew more distant and withdrawn. It was like I was watching my marriage crumble before my eyes, brick by agonizing brick. One night, I broke down. I couldn't take it anymore. I sat Daniel down and poured out my heart. I told him how Eleanor was manipulating him, how she was draining our finances, how she was destroying our marriage. He listened, his face impassive. When I was finished, he sighed and said, Serena, you're exaggerating. Mom just wants what's best for me. What's best for you? Or what's best for her control over you? I cried. Don't talk about my mother like that, he snapped, his eyes flashing with anger. She's done everything for me. And what about me, Daniel? What about us? Don't I deserve some consideration? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Mom needs the money, Serena. She needs it more than we do. That was it. That was the moment I realized he was completely lost. He had chosen his mother over me. He was her puppet, and I was just an expendable accessory. The fight was gone. The hope was extinguished. I knew what I had to do. I stopped the payments, just like that. I knew Eleanor wouldn't take it well, but I was past caring. I'd reached my limit. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Daniel avoided me, and Eleanor radiated a simmering rage that filled the house like a noxious gas. I could feel her eyes boring into me even when she wasn't in the same room. A week later, the storm broke. I was in the kitchen making dinner when Eleanor stormed in, her face contorted with fury. How dare you? She shrieked, her voice shrill and piercing. How dare you cut off my money? I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I can't afford it anymore, Eleanor. We need to save for our future. Our future? She scoffed. You're not part of our future. You're just a temporary inconvenience. Daniel deserves someone better, someone who can provide for him. Provide for him. Or provide for you? I shot back. Her face turned purple with rage. Get out! She screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the door. Get out of my house! You don't belong here! I stood there, stunned. Her house. This was the breaking point. This was the moment I realized just how far gone she was, how completely delusional she'd become. Eleanor, I said, my voice calm despite the turmoil raging inside me. This house is in my name. I own it. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You're lying, she spat. Daniel and I paid for this house. No, you didn't, I said, my voice unwavering. My parents helped me buy this house before I even met Daniel. My name is the only one on the deed. The color drained from her face. She looked like she'd been slapped. For a moment, she was speechless. Then the shock morphed into pure, unadulterated rage. You little snake, she screamed, advancing towards me. You tricked us. You've been playing us all along. Daniel, who had been lurking in the hallway, finally stepped forward. Mom, calm down, he said, his voice weak and hesitant. Calm down, she shrieked. She's stealing our home. She's ruining our family. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Serena, just give her what she wants, he said, his voice barely a whisper. It's not a big deal. I couldn't believe my ears. After everything, after all the sacrifices I'd made, he was still taking her side. "Are you serious, Daniel?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "After everything I've done for you, for this family, you're siding with her?" He avoided my gaze, mumbling something about keeping the peace. That was it. That was the final straw. I was completely alone. "You know what?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You're right, Eleanor, I don't belong here, but I'm not leaving empty-handed." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them both standing there, speechless. I went straight to my bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. "I need to sell my house," I said, my voice firm despite the tears streaming down my face. "And I need to sell it as soon as possible." Mr. Harrison was a godsend. He'd handled my parents' estate years ago, and he knew me well enough to understand that I wasn't making this decision lightly. "I understand, Serena," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'll handle all the paperwork. Just be ready to sign when the time comes." Over the next week, I started packing my things. I didn't tell Eleanor or Daniel what I was doing. Let them think I was bluffing. Let them think I was just having a temporary meltdown. They'd soon find out just how serious I was. Daniel tried to act like everything was normal. He'd come home from work, give me a perfunctory kiss, and ask about my day. But I could see the anxiety in his eyes, the fear that I might actually follow through with my threat. Eleanor, on the other hand, kept her distance. She probably figured Daniel would smooth things over, that I'd eventually cave and go back to being her obedient little cash cow. As I packed, memories flooded back. The first Christmas I spent with them, when Eleanor criticized my cooking and said Daniel deserved a wife who could actually prepare a decent meal. The countless birthdays and anniversaries she ignored, while showering Daniel and his sister with lavish gifts. The endless stream of backhanded compliments and subtle insults that chipped away at my self-esteem. No more. I was done. I was done being their doormat. 2 days before the house went on the market, Eleanor finally confronted me again. She barged into my room without knocking, her face twisted with rage. "What are you doing with all those boxes?" she demanded. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice devoid of emotion. "I'm selling the house." Her jaw dropped. "You can't do that. This is our home. Daniel grew up here." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because the deed says otherwise. I bought this house before I even met Daniel. It was never yours to begin with." She spluttered, trying to come up with a response, but I didn't give her the chance. "You told me to leave, Eleanor," I said, my voice cold and hard. "And I'm leaving, but I'm taking my house with me." Daniel walked in just as I was finishing my sentence. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice shaky. "Your wife is ruining this family," Eleanor screamed. "She's selling our home." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Tell him the truth, Daniel. This house was never hers, and it's not yours either." Daniel looked down at the floor, avoiding both our gazes. He knew I was right, but he didn't have the courage to admit it. "Serena, can't we talk about this?" he asked weakly. "We're way past talking," I said, my voice flat. "You chose her over me, every single time. Now you can live with the consequences." I turned my back on them and continued packing. I could feel their eyes on me, burning with anger and resentment, but I didn't care. I was finally taking control of my life. The house sold faster than I expected. Mr. Harrison had a prospective buyer within days, and they were eager to close the deal. The offer was more than fair, and I accepted it without hesitation. When Eleanor found out, she went into full panic mode. She tried everything to stop the sale, even claiming she had sentimental rights to the property. Mr. Harrison shut her down immediately. On the day I was scheduled to move out, Eleanor played her final desperate card. She called Daniel's brother, Mark, and his wife, Brittany, to come over and talk some sense into me. Mark and Brittany were just as unpleasant as Eleanor, two sides of the same toxic coin. They all sat in the living room, ganging up on me, throwing insults and accusations. "You're tearing this family apart," Mark shouted. "You're selfish and ungrateful." I calmly stood up and looked them each in the eye. "No," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'm just done being used." Then I dropped the final bombshell. "Oh, and by the way," I said, a wicked smile spreading across my face, "the new owners of this house? It's the Johnsons." Eleanor turned pale. The Johnsons were her arch rivals, her sworn enemies. The thought of them living in her beloved house was more than she could bear. As I loaded the last of my boxes into the moving truck, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was free. Free from Eleanor's manipulation, Daniel's cowardice, and the toxic environment they had created. I smiled. It was over. I moved to a new city. A smaller, quieter place, far away from the suffocating influence of Eleanor and Daniel. I used the money from the house sale to start my own design studio. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time. I rented a small apartment in a trendy neighborhood, filled with artists and entrepreneurs. The energy was infectious. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. It wasn't easy. Starting a business from scratch is hard work. I spent countless hours networking, marketing my services, and building my portfolio. There were days when I doubted myself, days when I wanted to give up and crawl back into my shell. But I pushed through. I reminded myself why I was doing this. I reminded myself that I deserved to be happy. Slowly but surely, things started to fall into place. I landed a few small clients, then a few bigger ones. My reputation grew, and word-of-mouth referrals started pouring in. Within a year, my studio was thriving. I even hired a small team of talented designers to help with the workload. I also started to rediscover myself. I took up painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I joined a local hiking club and explored the beautiful trails surrounding the city. I made new friends, people who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could give them. For the first time in a long time, I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't constantly trying to please someone else. I was living my life on my own terms. I occasionally heard snippets of news about Eleanor and Daniel through mutual acquaintances. After I sold the house, Eleanor's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Without my financial support, she couldn't maintain her extravagant lifestyle. Her so-called friends started to distance themselves, and she quickly found herself isolated. Daniel moved back in with her, but their relationship was strained. Eleanor blamed him for letting me get away with selling the house, and he resented her for dragging him into her schemes. It was poetic justice in a way. They were stuck with each other, the perfect pair of manipulators and enablers. One day, I received an email from an old neighbor who used to live next door to Eleanor. "You won't believe it," she wrote. "The Johnsons completely remodeled the house. It's the nicest house on the block now." I couldn't help but smile. It was a fitting end to Eleanor's story. Her pride and joy transformed by the very people she despised. As for me, I had no regrets. Selling that house wasn't just about leaving a toxic environment. It was about reclaiming my power and choosing a future that was mine alone. It was about finally saying goodbye to the serpent's nest and embracing the freedom of a new beginning. About a month after settling into my new life, an unfamiliar number flashed on my phone screen. My heart pounded. I almost didn't answer it. What if it was her? What if she had somehow tracked me down? Taking a deep breath, I swiped to answer. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Serena, it's Daniel." My blood ran cold. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, my voice sharp. He hesitated. I just wanted to check on you," he said, his voice cautious, almost pleading. "Eleanor's been, well, things haven't been great since you left." I didn't respond. I had no interest in hearing about their problems. Let them stew in the mess they had created. "She's been losing it over the house," he continued, his voice laced with a hint of resentment. "Especially after finding out the Johnsons moved in. She blames me for not stopping you." "Stopping me?" I scoffed. "You had plenty of chances to stand up for me, Daniel, to be my partner, but you chose her every time. Now, I've chosen myself." He paused, then said something that caught me completely off guard. "I miss you, Serena." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken regrets. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You miss me? You didn't make one mistake, Daniel. You made a choice, over and over again, and now you're living with it." He started to say something to protest, but I cut him off. "Goodbye, Daniel," I said, my voice firm. "Don't call me again." I ended the call and blocked his number. I wasn't going back. I wouldn't let him or Eleanor drag me back into their toxic world. I had worked too hard to escape. The phone sat on my desk, the black screen reflecting my own determined face. I knew this was the right decision. It was over. Done. I had closed that chapter of my life, and I was ready to move on. Years have passed since I left Daniel and Eleanor. My design studio has continued to flourish. I've built a life I'm proud of, surrounded by people who love and support me. I haven't heard from Daniel or Eleanor since that phone call. Part of me wonders what they're up to, but mostly, I don't care. They're a distant memory, a painful chapter in my life that I've finally put behind me. I've learned a lot from that experience. I've learned the importance of setting boundaries, of standing up for myself, and of recognizing toxic people before they have a chance to destroy my life. I've also learned that it's never too late to start over, to rebuild your life from the ashes and create something beautiful and meaningful. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had stayed with Daniel, if I had continued to let Eleanor control my life. The thought sends a shiver down my spine. I can't imagine where I'd be today, probably miserable, resentful, and completely devoid of any sense of self-worth. I'm grateful for the experience in a way. It was painful, but it made me stronger. It taught me valuable lessons that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. I know that there are other people out there who are dealing with similar situations. People who are trapped in toxic relationships, who are being manipulated and controlled by someone they love. If you're one of those people, I want you to know that you're not alone. You're not crazy, and you deserve to be happy. It may seem impossible right now, but there is a way out. You can break free from the serpent's nest and reclaim your life. It won't be easy. It will require courage, strength, and a willingness to face your fears. But it's worth it. Trust me, it's worth it.